Well, UFC 271 is far closer than I would like, and this video will be late because of it, because I got busy. And with it comes a rematch that we've all kind of expected and have honestly been waiting for. Robert Whittaker versus Israel Adesanya. Other than that, this card's got some interesting fights in theory, some up-and-comers, some people working their way up the ranks, but honestly, it's all about Whittaker Adesanya. But as always, we're going to do it all the way through. Let's take a look at the early prelims of UFC 271. The early prelims have 9-2-1 Jeremiah Wells looking to get his second UFC win over the newcomer 3-0 Mike Blood Diamond Mathathea, or Mike Diamond according to the UFC website. Mathathea is about 2 inches taller. That's the only real measurement that I have or know. This is a weird one to look at, especially by early prelim standards, since Wells has one UFC fight, won by KO. Total, he has 4 wins, 3 submission, 2 decision. Seems to be a finisher with decent skills on the ground and a current takedown defense rank of 100%. Doesn't really matter, though, it's one fight. His losses have only come by decision, so going the distance doesn't seem to be exactly his specialty. He can do it, it just doesn't seem like that's his bread and butter. On the other hand, Mathathea has a background in kickboxing, having trained at Glory Kickboxing, and at this point, he has a win in every category. So it seems that he is decently well-rounded, able to go the distance, able to handle himself on the ground, and able to strike. The big question I have is where his talent level falls in comparison to the people he fought. Was he miles above his competition, or was he as good as his competition? I'm optimistic because it seems like surging to 3-0 and making your debut this early, you've obviously made an impression on people, so maybe it goes well. But picking a winner is difficult, and I'm going to go with Wells here. Wells has a bit more experience in MMA, and when I panic, I default to that. Mathathea could win this easily, I can't tell based on what I actually have available. Moving on, 27-4-0-1, Douglas D. Silva de Andrei looks to build a streak against the 17-4 Sergey Morosov, with Morosov being 4 years younger. Andrade is honestly weird to look at. He has a decent spread across striking and takedowns, 0.69 takedowns across his UFC fights at 3.79 landed to a 4.22 absorbed. None of that is awful, but there's no real area that I see him excelling in. He's a rounded fighter. He does have knockout power, but it doesn't show up all that often. Takedowns are used sporadically to varied effects. Sometimes he'll use a lot and win, sometimes he'll use a few and lose. It's all over the place. And honestly, Morosov is very similar. He has an even striking ratio, but outside the UFC, he has 8 knockouts, so he can finish, it just hasn't shown up in his UFC career. Takedowns are also a little weird. He's been able to rack them up when available, but it's not something that he throws every fighter goes for. Overall, it honestly seems like he hangs on the feet and works that angle, but I can't tell. Now, Vegas for this fight likes Morosov, and I honestly have to agree. Andrade is very streaky, and his finishing is on and off at best. Morosov does better on the feet, and honestly, both fighters seem to like to stay there. Can Andrade shoot the takedown? Yes. Do I expect him to? I don't know. There's not a whole lot here. You have a .69 average, and you use it so sporadically that it seems like a matchup thing. But I don't know how this matches up truly in this scenario. 6-0-1, AJ Dobson looks to go to 7-0 against 5-1 Jacob Mamba Malcone, with Malcone being 4 years younger, Dobson taking though 2 inches in height and 2 inches in reach. Now, Dobson is coming off a dominant Contender Series win where he choked out Hashim, Arkaga, and outstruck him 39-8. And even outside the UFC, he has a decent win spread across 3 categories, so he's definitely competent across all 3 facets of the game. Well, I say facets, ways in winning. Malcone, on the other hand, is a ground-heavy fighter who grinds toward a decision to win a fight. Second UFC fight, he racked up an impressive 8 takedowns, and keeping that up is something dangerous. His striking is lackluster, low and equal landed to absorbed, so we know where his strength definitely lies, but it's dangerous still. Now, Vegas here favors Dobson, and I do agree as well. Dobson has this seemingly well-rounded game, and it serves him being able to control when the fight goes down and the ability to survive on the ground. If Malcone needs to go to the ground and Dobson keeps it on the feet, I like Dobson. If it goes to the ground, Dobson has enough skill to get it back to the feet and be dangerous. 5-1-0, Carlos Blackjack Ulberg tries to rebound against Fabio, the Water Buffalo, Charant. Ulberg is 4 years older, taking 3 inches in height and reach. Ulberg is striking heavy and outstriking his UFC opponents and racking up 2 KO wins outside the UFC. Currently at 100% takedown defense, which helps keep it on the feet, and however, it is also important to note he's been knocked out once despite dominating the fight on the feet. That doesn't mean much because knockouts are any time of a fight, but it's something worth noting that he has been caught before. Charant is on a 3-fight losing streak, but throughout these 3 losses, he's been finished 3 times and currently has a striking differential of 2.01 landed to 5.57 absorbed. Additionally, he doesn't have a great takedown defense considering he only has a 0%. I don't know why this is a fight, if I'm being honest with you all. And obviously the favorite here is Ulberg, and I agree. Ulberg's been consistent while he's had issues, and he's won knock him at any time against someone with a differential of 2.01 to 5.57 and no UFC wins. I very much like it against Charant here. And yes, as I said again, I'm repeating myself, he's been knocked out once, but it was a last-minute knockout. I don't see Fabio Charant pulling that off. And I have to ask, who put the dude who's surging against the dude with no wins? 13-4, Alexander the Great Hernandez tries to get going against 15-4-1 Renato Moicano, or Renato Moicano Camarero, according to the Sherdog. Moicano is 3 years older and 2 inches taller. Now, Hernandez seems to be decent on the feet, hanging in most fights with an average landed and absorbed being almost equal. Majority of his UFC wins, he's knocked out his opponent. On the other hand, outside the UFC, it's been more so decision wins, which seems to have come into his power. Takedown game is something that he has in his back pocket, but he hasn't used it in his last 3 fights. I don't know if that was completely a stylistic decision or he just felt confident in his striking at that point. Changing coaches, changing game plans, it's all a thing that I don't quite have a full grasp of with him. Now, on the other hand, Moicano is much more of a finish or be finished fighter. His last 4 fights all ending in finishes, with him winning 2 of them. His ground game is also pretty good with a 1.96 average and multiple submission wins. Takedown defense is 78%, but it seems like he's able to work a position that he can turn it, but at the same time he can be dominated on the ground. Vegas is betting on Moicano, and as boring as it is, I agree. Moicano's killer be killed attitude makes him dangerous in multiple aspects, and while Hernandez is able to hang in there and is very competent, Moicano's finishing power puts him a little on edge here. And obviously I can see Hernandez winning if he plays it smart, keeps it safe, and grinds it out. But with that constant threat of being there right on top of you, Moicano is very dangerous. And we see a lot of fighters that when faced with an unrelenting pressure, they get a shot gets put in and they get put to sleep. 9-2, Leomana Boy Martinez, trying to build his record with a win against 7-1 Ronnie the Heat Lawrence. Martinez is 4 years younger, 2 inches taller, and 2 inches in reach. Now, Martinez is a striking-focused fighter with a 4.84 landed, a 3.97 absorbed, and it does go along with the fact he has 8 KO wins. Par for the course, really. In addition, he can throw takedowns. However, he's also taken down pretty easily with a 0% takedown defense and a submission loss in the Contender Series. It does seem like he can survive on the ground, but at the same time, striking is where he tends to reside. Lawrence is a little similar with a good striking with striking being a strength, but a better differential here, 3.80 to 1.09. But more important is the fact that he also has racked up 20 takedowns across his last 2 fights, as well a Contender Series and a fight. This could speak to his opponent's skill as he was able to rack those up, but even being able to throw 20 and landing that many, that is dangerous and possible to be game-changing. Because if you rack up 2, that's time on top. That is points, that is damage, that is exhaustion, that is you in control, and you understand somebody in that perspective. And the favorite is Lawrence, and I, again, have to entirely agree. The ability to rack up those takedowns is dangerous, and with Martinez, who has a 0% takedown defense, even if you're good at surviving on the ground, it's exhausting to have takedown after takedown after takedown racked up against you. So with Martinez being able to be taken down with what seems like at a whim, it's going to be bad. Now, obviously, Martinez can switch positions and maybe he can survive long enough to keep it on the feet. But then you have the technical striking. Then you have a difference. And obviously, Martinez has the power. But with a striking defense like that, it seems to be very good. Obviously, you have the difference in fights, but still. But that ends the early prelims. You kind of see what I mean. In other cards, you've had early prelims with a lot of interesting up-and-comers trying to get their feet going, or fighters who have slipped are trying to crawl their way back. This is a lot of new people fighting. But moving on, we're going to the prelims. 11-2, William Nightmare Knight, and that is Nightmare spelled with a K, because why not? We can keep going, and since 31, 9-2, Maximus Grishin. Knight is 4 years younger, but Grishin takes 5 inches in reach and height. Knight is somewhat typical light heavyweight, with the about even landed to absorbed and the dangerous knockout power. What's more interesting is his takedown game and the fact that he has the ability to generate takedowns and pound on his opponent. He does have some standing KOs, but the most consistent part of his game seems to be the takedowns. Grishin, on the other hand, is the stereotypical light heavyweight. Striking background, equal landed to absorbed, and this is his third fight at light heavy, and he seems to be sticking with his roots while striking. Outside the UFC, he has racked up 16 KOs. Inside the UFC, he's been relatively unsuccessful in that regard. Now, here is where the first disagreement actually. Vegas likes Grishin. I'm going to go with Knight. Knight's constant takedowns make him very dangerous, even from the perspective of, I'm going to grind out a boring win in points. And while Grishin is very good at striking, we've seen fighters like Curtis Blades brave the dangers and rack up takedowns. And to use Blades as an example, at heavyweight, if Lewis doesn't get that really weird uppercut knockout, Blades probably can win that fight. So I imagine this fight kind of reminds me of a very different way of what this is. We have someone who's really good at takedowns and likely will be able to use them to great effect versus the striker. Next up is 24-6, Alex Perez tries to come back against the 15-6, Matt Danger Schnell. With Perez being 3 years younger, Schnell, however, taking 2 inches in reach. 2 inches in height and 5 inches in reach. Perez, like a good majority of flyweights, is a well-rounded fighter, though a good deal of his wins have been by securing takedowns, shown in his 2.92 takedown average. And additionally, his submission game is very dangerous, having won 3 of his UFC fights by submissions, and 12 total in his career. His striking isn't bad, but isn't the strongest part of his game, but I say he's well-rounded because it is a part of his game that hasn't been neglected. His striking isn't incredible, but it's good. That's what I mean by well-rounded here. Schnell is a little bit different. He's a ground-focused fighter that has a much lower takedown average, which tells me he more likes to play from the back in different positions to set up these submissions. It makes him very dangerous in these different positions, but the difference here is that his striking is about dead even, landed and absorbed the same. Now, Perez is the favorite, and I see why. Takedown ability and competent ground game seem to match Schnell, and his ability to strike exceeds Schnell's for sure and makes him dangerous on the feet. And that's why I'm agreeing with Vegas here. Not much else to say. 25-19, Roxanne Happy Warrior Modafari wins this fight for the worst nickname and looks to rebound against 8-0 Casey King ONeill. ONeill is only 15 years younger and an inch shorter. Modafari is a ground-focused fighter in her entirety, especially with how her absorb is close to 2 times higher as her landed. Now, in every win, she's racked up at least 1 takedown, which proves how essential it is to her success in the octagon. It isn't so much a submission-focused grappling, but it is definitely a control one. Now, ONeill is riding a 3-fight win streak and really has had a much more rounded game with a much better landed and absorbed, not that that's super hard, and a consistent ground game that she is able to turn into submissions, but more focused on the finish. Now, the favorite here is ONeill, and it might have something to do with the 15 years age difference, but her ability to control takedowns and play off the ground works in her favor in this scenario, and her striking definitely is better than Modafari's. And to end these prelims, we have a heavyweight bout. Arlovski van der Aa. Which I might have said wrong. 32-20, Jesus Christ, Andrei the Pitbull Arlovski looks to keep winning against Jared the Mountain van der Aa. And no, he's not 6'9". Van der Aa is 13 years younger and taking 3 inches in reach. Now, Arlovski is the textbook definition of a heavyweight. He's a swing and bang fighter, but as of recent, he hasn't managed to find his power so much, winning some more by decision and overwhelming with his striking. His chin has been a weakness as of late, especially in addition to a weak ground game, though that's not too odd at the heavyweight division. His takedown defense is a 78%, which isn't awful. Van der Raa is a bit more of the same. His absorbed is more than his landed, but his power has come out a bit more, KOs being his thing. His takedown game is also completely ignorable and unimportant in this fight, as in it barely exists, and I think he has, if I remember correctly, he has a singular takedown and like a 0% takedown defense. But after that, the favorite here is Arlovski, and I kind of have to disagree. Van der Raa seems to still have his chin, and while Arlovski definitely has the technique, Van der Raa taking those 3 inches in reach and being 13 years younger, I feel like he'll be able to pour it on and use power more, and Arlovski is able to be caught. I think Arlovski can win, but I'm picking Van der Raa here just due to the sheer athleticism difference. But we're finally on to the main card and the fights that I kind of care about. Starting us off, we have 28-12, Bobby King Green trying to rebuild a streak against 13-4 Nasrad Hakras. Hakras, being 9 years younger, taking an inch in reach. Now, Bobby Green is a heavy striker with a very good difference between landed and absorbed, 5.51 to 3.56. He is deadly on the feet. It's a mixture of technical striking and power with 10 wins by KO and decision. This means he definitely excels there. His takedown game is also a bit of a threat, with him being able to stack takedowns when available, and that's something he works very well. Hakras, on the other hand, seems to just hang with the striking with a very similar difference as Green. He is a little worse in regards to the takedowns, though his defense is marginally better. It seems that he might not either be as willing to go to the ground, or he's more desperate to keep it on the feet. He does seem to have more of the knockout power, but it doesn't seem to be that much more of the knockout power. That was redundant, but you get what I mean. The Vegas favors Bobby Green, and to be boring, I have to agree. Hakras is talented on the feet, but Green's takedown availability and experience, in addition to his already very competent striking, makes him dangerous. 9-2, Kyler Matrix Phillips tries to rebound against Marcelo Pitbull Rojo, with Phillips being 7 years younger and no other real measurement differences. Phillips is a pretty well-rounded fighter looking at his UFC fights. Really solid striking differential, 5.20, 3.15. He also backs that up with what seems like solid knockout power. The most important part of his stats, though, is his takedowns and how he averages 3.20 across his fights. In every single one of his UFC fights, barring his Contender Series one, he has secured at least one takedown, normally two, in these fights. Contrastingly, Rojo is much more ground heavy, lacking the striking consistency that Phillips seems to have. He has a 5.10 landed to 7.30. He does have more submission wins, which leads to this more ground-focused style where he's able to play different positions and control the ground game as a whole. Vegas and I both agree that Phillips is the favorite here, given his success on the ground and feet giving him the edge. Being able to work both aspects of that game make him very dangerous. If it goes to the ground, I think it's closer, but if it stays on the feet, gonna go with Phillips here. But 14-5, Jared Killer Gorilla Cannonier looks to make it back to contention against the 23-7 Derek Brunson. Brunson being 2 inches taller. Now, Cannonier is a striker, plain and simple. Got about even landed and absorbed that a lot of strikers can have, and he definitely has the power. His power is there in spades, and he's been able to hang in there against high competition. His takedown game is negligible, but his takedown defense is pretty good at 62%. Brunson, on the other hand, is a little different. He has the power in spades and backs it up with this aggressive takedown game, averaging 3.15 a fight. And it really has been a key of his recent wins, and he does in fact have submission wins, so it is something in his bag of tricks. Now, comparing these fighters, it's a close one. Cannonier is the favorite, and I can see why, and I think it has to do with the fact that against really high-level competition, he's been very good recently, being able to hang in and endure as well as deal it out. And for the sake of being boring, I am going to agree. This has less to do with me thinking Brunson's bad, but I think Cannonier's just been hot recently, and I'm kind of counting on that streak riding forward. But next up, we have the heavyweights. The ones I care about, at least. 26-8, Derek the Black Beast Lewis looks to take the head off of 13-3, Tai Bam Bam Tuivasa. Lewis being 8 years older and having 4 additional inches of reach. Now, if I say Derek Lewis, we know who I'm talking about. Even strikes landed and absorbed, and power upon power upon power in his striking. Wins by last second KOs. He's very good at doing that. He's winning fights by KO a lot of the time. He's not exactly a technical striker, and he can throw a takedown, but it's rare and it's not really something he uses. He has a 55% takedown defense, for crying out loud. We know what we're getting in Lewis. Tuivasa is kind of the same. There's a slight differential between landed and absorbed, but it's still close. He has no takedown defense, and his defense is only 50%. These two fighters are very similar, and I see it staying on the feet. The favorite is Lewis, and the real reason for that is that Lewis has faced this very high-level competition. Lewis fought Ngannou, and while he won in one of the most boring fights ever, we saw strategy and intelligence. Lewis faced Gane and lost. Lewis has faced a lot of high-level competition, won and lost in different ways, but Lewis has faced and hung in, and he hasn't really moved in the rankings all that much. Tuivasa is climbing. Now, here's the thing. Lewis has a really good chance to win this fight, but because I want to see a shoey, I'm going to disagree and go with Tuivasa for no real technical reason here. Tuivasa's key to winning is going to be getting in close and getting the shot he needs. Tuivasa needs the knockout. But we're on to the main event. The title fight, the rematch, and it's odd to say there's only one, considering the last ones have been double, but this one is worth it. 21-1, Israel, the last stylebender Adesanya, rematches with the 23-5, Robert the Reaper Whittaker. Adesanya being 4 inches taller and taking 7 inches in reach. We kind of know what to expect with Adesanya, but to clarify, he is a striking machine with a kickboxing background and then MMA techniques added on top of it, and he's immensely successful with it. He has a variety of techniques at his disposal, and he handles himself well in a variety of positions, adjusting and surviving when he's in a bad position. He is not exactly a ground fighter, doesn't really use takedowns, but we see him survive takedowns. He survived Jan Blachowicz taking him down. He survived the occasional attempts at takedowns thrown by Marvin Vettori. Going over to Whittaker, Whittaker instead has a more rounded game. He's a competent striking game and a ground game he's able to use when necessary. Much more of a, I'm going to adapt and use what's against you. And Whittaker at his core is a competent fighter who knows strengths and is able to work on his weaknesses to accomplish his goal. That's what makes this fight really difficult. Because Whittaker's had time to look at what went wrong and examine the fight. And Adesanya's been fighting other people. Whittaker's not really honestly struggled, aside from Gastelum, in these fights. He handled Cannonier. And it's not exactly a light division that he's in. So the favorite is Adesanya here. And I have to agree. The 7 inches in reach and the sheer experience and versatility in his striking. Because remember, before coming to MMA, the man had a kickboxing career, and I believe he had 100 professional wins. The versatility in his striking, I think, makes him very dangerous. And while Whittaker can definitely adjust and counter, I think Adesanya's bag of tricks is just so big that it makes him almost too dangerous. And I think that makes him the winner.